I'm that guy everyone thinks is too old school for his own good. The one who still carries a notebook, checks calibration by ear, and prefers handwritten initials on a sign-off sheet instead of another damn app notification. The dinosaur. That's what they call me when they think I'm out of earshot. And that's fine. Dinosaurs ruled the earth for a very long time. It started 6 months ago, the day 3 new hires showed up. All fresh degrees, shiny watches, and that startup swagger that makes them talk before they listen. They were assigned to modernize our operations. My operations. We build and test industrial temperature control systems, the kind that sit inside hospitals, data centers, and aircraft. One wrong line in the process and something burns, leaks, or dies. It's a delicate rhythm of heat, pressure, timing. You don't learn it from PowerPoint slides. You learn it from years of burns on your hands. They came in like a gust of caffeine and self-confidence. I liked that at first. Energy isn't bad. But by the end of their first week, they were suggesting improvements. Do we really need this double check? This step feels redundant. Can't we automate this part with a macro? I kept my tone even. If you can prove it's faster and safer, we can try it in a pilot run. But pilots weren't their style. They started tweaking live runs. Shortcuts. Shiny fixes. The kind that look brilliant for a week, until something breaks. They rolled their chairs into my section one morning, all 3 of them grinning like they were unveiling the next iPhone. "Hey, old-timer," said Alex, the self-appointed lead. "We updated your checklist, streamlined it for efficiency. You'll thank us later." He slid a printed sheet across my desk. My name was still on it, my format, my logo. But the sequence was wrong. 2 verification lines were gone. The pressure hold step, which prevented line bursts, had been moved after the main pump test. I looked at it for a long second, then smiled politely. "Appreciate the effort," I said, signing the corner with my initials. "Mind emailing me the file?" He blinked. "Why?" "For documentation. I like to keep track of process iterations." He laughed. "You really do love your paperwork." Yes, I do. Paperwork saves lives, and sometimes jobs. That day, I created a new folder on the network, Revision Tracker, Unofficial. I logged every change they made, date-stamped with screenshots. When they edited the manual, I archived the original. When they sent Slack messages about outdated steps, I exported the thread. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was preserving evidence, because I've seen how this game plays out. By week 3, production started to wobble. Nothing dramatic, just micro errors. Sensors failing twice in one day. Units needing reassembly. Little things that pile up until they scream. The plant manager called a quick huddle. The new hires were ready. "Legacy systems," said Alex, crossing his arms. "They're too slow to catch up with the updates." He meant me. I just nodded. "Could be," I said. "Let's monitor a few cycles before jumping to conclusions." They smirked. To them I was the problem. A relic clinging to manual redundancy. A week later, the first serious incident hit. During a stress test, a pump line ruptured and dumped 30 gallons of coolant across the floor. Nobody was hurt, thank God, but the cleanup cost a day's worth of output. The report blamed pressure variance. That variance came from the missing hold step. I didn't rush to say it. Instead, I opened my folder, pulled the screenshot from the day Alex edited the sheet, and printed both versions. Mine and theirs. Then I slid them into a sleeve and left it in my drawer. I wasn't going to use it yet. Not until they made me. The next Monday, we had a meeting with upper management. Everyone sat around the long table. The new hires, the manager, the QA lead, and me. PowerPoints flickered on the wall. Alex led the presentation like a TED Talk. "We've identified inefficiencies," he said. "We believe certain redundant checks in the old SOP are bottlenecks causing delays." "Old SOP? My SOP?" He looked straight at me. "With all due respect, Mr. Mason, your version doesn't align with the latest automation standards." I nodded slowly. Appreciate your feedback. Just curious. Which part specifically? He pointed to the missing step. This one. The double verification on valve integrity. It's obsolete. There was a pause, small but heavy. I let it stretch until it hurt. Then I said quietly, obsolete? That's the one that failed during the rupture last week, correct? The room went still. Alex's jaw tightened. Coincidence, he said. The failure came from a hardware defect. Maybe, I said, though according to your version of the checklist, the defect would have been caught before pressurization, if the integrity check hadn't been removed. The QA lead shifted in his chair. Someone cleared their throat. The silence wasn't friendly anymore. I leaned back, calm, steady. You can keep talking, I said softly. But before we debate methodology, I think it's fair to know that I wrote the manual you're updating. Their faces changed all at once. Confusion, then disbelief. I drafted it in 2013, I continued. Updated it 8 times. Every revision signed, certified, and audited by both the state and the client. You'll find my initials on the footer of every version, including yours. No one spoke. You could hear the air conditioner hum like a nervous breath. I didn't raise my voice, didn't gloat. I just looked down at their streamlined checklist, flipped it over, and set it gently back on the table. Efficiency, I said, isn't about cutting corners. It's about knowing which ones hold the roof up. The manager called a break. Nobody made eye contact. I walked out, poured myself a coffee from the machine that's older than half the team, and waited. Because I knew what came next wasn't anger. It was the storm before the audit. The strange thing about a failing system is that it never crashes all at once. It groans first. The signs are quiet, tiny, almost polite. A rejected batch here, a calibration off by half a degree there. It whispers before it screams. That whisper started 2 weeks after that meeting. Alex and his team were still in charge of modernization. They strutted around with tablets and new flowcharts, claiming everything was optimized for throughput. Their buzzwords sounded smart enough to fool management. Automation mapping, lean conversion, cycle compression. I'd heard it all before, usually right before something expensive broke. My job wasn't to argue, it was to keep the ship afloat. So I kept my head down and did what I'd always done, document everything. Every alert, every deviation, every sarcastic comment that began with, "No offense, but your way is outdated." By then we had 2 separate realities running under one roof. Their system, sleek, digital, full of holes. Mine, slow, analog, but airtight. And then came the week of the double shipment. We were supposed to deliver 2 critical units to a hospital in Ohio. Strict safety parameters. Every valve, every weld, every pressure cycle logged for traceability. It wasn't just paperwork. Those records meant patients didn't die. That Monday, Alex's team pushed a software update to the test rigs. They skipped the manual valve verification, claiming the system could self-diagnose leaks. It couldn't. On paper, everything looked fine. In reality, the sensors were cross-wired because someone had swapped ports on the PLC. I watched the numbers climb on the monitor, perfectly stable, until the temperature graph spiked. Then, without warning, the rig hissed, coughed, and blew a burst of coolant vapor, so violent it set off the fire suppression alarm. The floor froze. No one moved for a second. Then chaos. Shouting, sirens, flashing red lights. I hit the emergency cutoff and pulled the main breaker. The hissing stopped. The silence after that was worse than the noise. Later, QA logged it as a Level 2 incident. No injuries, but major damage. The clients would have to be informed. That night, I sat at my station long after everyone went home. I printed the incident report, attached the sensor log, and opened my folder. The one labeled Revision Tracker, Unofficial. I stapled the report to the change request they'd filed for Process Optimization. Same timestamp. Same step removed. The next morning, Alex looked pale. He'd lost that confident smirk. But pride is a stubborn disease. He called an emergency stand-up, tried to spin the event as a learning opportunity. He used the word innovation 6 times in 5 minutes. "We can't let fear of failure hold us back," he said, pacing. "If we don't move fast, we stagnate." I leaned against a cabinet, arms crossed. "There's a difference between moving fast and skipping steps." He shot me a glare. "With all due respect, Mason, not everyone wants to do things like it's 1995. "Good," I said, because back then people still respected checklists. The room went quiet again. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights felt louder. After that, the floor divided. Not officially, but spiritually. Half the crew followed the new hires. Half stayed with the old man. You could feel it in the air, a tension like static before lightning. Then came the audits. Not the big formal one, not yet. These were the soft whispers from upstairs. The client's been asking questions. The QA board noticed inconsistencies. "Keep your paperwork tight." That was my language. Paperwork was my armor. One night, around 8 p.m., I was the last one on the floor. I heard footsteps. The plant manager, Robert, he leaned on the doorframe, hands in pockets. "Rough week," he said. "Could be worse," I replied. He sighed. "You've been through this before, haven't you? Every few years. Someone new comes in, promises revolution, burns the manual, then realizes the ashes don't hold structure." He chuckled softly. "They don't like you much, you know." "I'm not here to be liked," he nodded. "Good. Because corporate's asking for a review of all process changes since January. Guess who's going to lead the analysis?" That's when I realized he wasn't warning me. He was giving me the rope. By the end of that week, I had everything prepared. A clean, chronological breakdown. What they changed, when they changed it, what failed afterward. No emotion, no commentary, just evidence. Then the hammer dropped. A QA alert hit everyone's inbox. Critical process deviation flagged by client audit. Immediate review required. Turns out the hospital in Ohio had caught the problem before installation. Their incoming inspection failed both units. One leak, one electrical fault. They attached photos, the same model number, the same batch. Alex tried to talk his way out of it, claimed legacy interference, but the client's time-stamped report said otherwise. The faulty units were produced under his optimized process. The VP called for an emergency review the next morning. Full house, operations, QA, compliance, everyone. The kind of meeting where careers end quietly. Alex arrived early, hair combed too neatly, face too pale. I sat opposite, quiet. My stack of folders was thick, precise, organized like a weapon that didn't need to be drawn. The VP started with one sentence. "We need accountability." And for the first time since they arrived, Alex didn't have a script. He opened his mouth, then closed it again when I slid the first folder across the table. "Before we assign blame," I said evenly, "we might want to look at the documentation trail." He looked at the cover page, my initials, the timestamp, the note, process revision proposed by A. Nichols, executed without pilot approval. No one spoke. The VP flipped through the pages slowly. Each one was a nail in a coffin built entirely out of arrogance. The manager looked at me. "You've been tracking all this?" "Since day one," I said. "Some habits die hard." No one laughed. That was the moment the room shifted. The hierarchy reversed itself. Suddenly they weren't correcting me anymore. They were realizing I'd been documenting them. I didn't smile, didn't need to. The data spoke louder than pride ever could, and somewhere in that silence, I heard it. The sound I'd been waiting for since the day they called me outdated. The sound of realization. The collapse had begun. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and tension. Nobody touched the pastries laid out on the table, the kind of stale, store-bought muffins they always bring in to soften the blow of bad news. It didn't work. The blow was coming either way. The VP stood at the front, arms crossed, waiting for the compliance team to join the call. On the wall, the projector showed a single slide. Root cause analysis, Incident chain. Below it, my name. And Alex's. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dark rings under his eyes. Shirt wrinkled. Fingers twitching against his tablet. For once, he wasn't talking. That alone was worth noting. Compliance dialed in from headquarters. 3 faces on the screen, all expressionless. The kind of people who speak in citations and clause numbers. The lead auditor, a woman named Dr. Lane, adjusted her glasses and began, "Let's review the deviation event tied to the Nichols process update." Even the word Nichols landed heavy. They walked through it, step by step. January, Efficiency Initiative. February, Revision of SOP 9C by new hires. March, Process deviations begin. April, Client audit failure, shipment rejected. Every date, every note matched my logs. Because of course they did. At slide 6, Dr. Lane stopped. "Mr. Mason," she said, "you were the original author of this SOP, correct?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Initial release, version 1.0, October 2013. And these changes made in February. Did you authorize or review them?" "No." She glanced over the rims of her glasses. "Did anyone in compliance sign off?" "No," I said again. Silence. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. Then the VP looked at Alex. "Is that accurate?" Alex hesitated. You could see the war behind his eyes. Pride versus survival. He swallowed hard. "Technically, yes, but—" The auditor cut him off. "There is no but in compliance." That's when I opened my folder. Not dramatically, not for show. Just a quiet motion. I slid forward the physical copies. My logs, my screenshots, the emails with timestamps. Every modification, every Slack message, every change that went live without review. The room rustled with the sound of paper. It was the sound of reckoning. "Let the record show," I said calmly, "that all of this was communicated, repeatedly. I did not override anyone. I documented. I waited." The QA lead leaned forward, squinting. "These notes have internal ticket numbers," he said. "You tied every process change to incident data?" "Yes. I like clean patterns." He nodded slowly. "You found one." The VP sat back, exhaling through his nose. Jesus Christ. But I wasn't done. I reached into the folder one last time and placed a thin blue binder on top of the pile. The original manual. Faded cover. Edges worn smooth from use. "I wrote this," I said quietly. "Every procedure in this building traces back to this binder. We can change, automate, evolve. That's fine. But the foundation stays. You don't rebuild the plane mid-flight." Dr. Lane looked at it for a long moment. Then she said, "Mr. Mason, would you be willing to assist us in a full internal audit of all procedural deviations since Q1? "Willing?" I said. "I've already started." Someone snorted, not out of disrespect, but disbelief. Even the VP cracked a half smile, the kind you give when a storm is already in motion and you know it's too late to stop it. The audit began that afternoon. It lasted 3 days. 3 days of combing through logs, comparing SOP versions, matching timestamps, interviewing operators, analyzing failure chains. I didn't talk much. I didn't need to. My notes did the talking. By the end of day 3, the report was clear. Root cause: unauthorized procedural modification by unapproved personnel. Contributing factors: lack of oversight, inadequate pilot validation, failure to document changes. Primary impact: client rejection, safety noncompliance, reputational risk. In plain English, they broke it, they hit it, and we almost paid for it. The VP called one final meeting. Smaller this time, just the core team. Everyone looked smaller too. Alex's swagger was gone. His voice cracked when he spoke. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," he said. "We were trying to improve." "Improvement," I interrupted gently, "isn't what happens when you delete the hard parts." He looked down. "You could have stopped us." "I tried," I said. "You called it resistance." No anger in my tone, just truth, leveled like a blade laid flat on the table. After the meeting, I sat alone in the break room. The rain outside hit the windows in soft rhythms. I poured myself a cup of coffee. Same burnt taste. Same cracked mug I'd used for a decade. And for the first time in months, it didn't taste bitter. That night, I got an email from Dr. Lane. Subject: Audit Summary. Final Review. Mr. Mason, thank you for your cooperation during the investigation. Your documentation has been instrumental in identifying the failure chain. The Audit Committee recommends process reinstatement per SOP V8.3 and a formal policy on pilot validation before procedural updates. Additionally, the Board has proposed that you oversee the retraining and certification program for all technical staff. Congratulations. You've just been promoted. I read it twice, just to make sure it wasn't a typo. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. The factory lights hummed through the night. It wasn't triumph, I felt. Not exactly. It was something quieter, steadier, like exhaling after holding your breath for months. The next morning I arrived early, before anyone else. I went to the testing line, ran my hand along the cold steel of the valve housing, and whispered under my breath, "Back to the manual." Later that day, Alex and his two partners were called into HR. By lunch, their desks were empty. No one said a word. The building moved on, as it always does, as if arrogance had never echoed through its halls. But I remembered, and I made sure the system would too. The Monday after the audit felt different. The air was clearer, quieter. The hum of the machines sounded steadier, almost respectful, like the whole building had exhaled. After weeks of tension, the posters about innovation and agility were still plastered on the walls, but now they looked like they were trying too hard. The new hires' workstations sat empty, their chairs turned neatly under the desks, as if no one had ever sat there at all. HR had already cleared their access badges. I didn't ask what happened in that meeting. I didn't need to. I knew how these things go: performance review, compliance violation, early termination. No fireworks, just a quiet erasure. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in repair. That morning I sat in the same conference room where it all fell apart. This time, though, the faces around the table were different. Department leads, QA heads, and the VP. At the center, a stack of printed documents with my name on the cover page. Title: Revised Training Framework, Process Integrity and Validation. "All right, Mason," the VP said, tapping the folder. "This is your show now." I looked at the team. Some were veterans who'd seen it all. Some were younger, quiet now, but watching. I could see the uncertainty in their faces, that same mix of pride and fear that comes when a system gets rebuilt. I stood up and said, "Here's the new rule." The screen lit up behind me. 3 bullet points appeared. 1. No process change goes live without a pilot. 2. Every pilot must generate metrics before approval. 3. No metric, no change, no exceptions. I let it hang in the air for a moment. Progress doesn't mean speed, I continued. It means proof. If we can't prove it works, it doesn't go in the manual. Someone from QA raised a hand. "What about automation upgrades?" "Same rule," I said. "Automation doesn't skip accountability." There was a murmur of quiet agreement. The VP leaned back, nodded, and said, "Let's make that policy." And just like that, the ship began to right itself. Over the next few weeks, I rewrote the training manuals, not as a relic, but as a living document. I added QR codes for live logs, annotated every step with why it exists, and created a feedback section where anyone could suggest improvements, as long as they backed them with data. I trained the team myself, not in a classroom, but on the floor, side by side, hands on the valves, sensors, and control panels. "This part," I'd say, "looks useless until you've seen what happens when it's missing." They listened, really listened. One of the younger techs, maybe 24, maybe 25, stayed after a session one day. "Sir," he said, "you don't talk like the managers. You talk like you've lived through all of it." I smiled a little. Kid, manuals aren't written by managers. They're written by survivors. He laughed, but I could tell he understood. The first official pilot under the new framework launched a month later. It ran perfectly. 0 deviations. The client signed off early, complimenting the clarity and precision of the updated SOP. That same week, corporate announced the formation of a new department, Operational Standards and Reliability. Guess who they put in charge? I didn't hang a new nameplate on my door, didn't change my title on LinkedIn. I still came in early, still carried my old notebook, still drank the same burnt coffee from the same chipped mug. But the difference showed in the way people talked now. No one said old methods anymore. They said verified process. No one rolled their eyes when I pulled out a paper log. They reached for one, too. The same floor that once ignored me now stopped to ask questions, not out of formality, but out of respect. One morning, the VP stopped by my office. He leaned on the doorframe, same as Robert had months earlier. "You know," he said, "HR asked if you wanted to update your job title. Director of Operations Training, maybe even VP of Process Integrity." I shook my head. "Titles don't make things better. Rules do." He smiled. "Fair enough. You'll get a raise, though." "Fine," I said. "Just make sure the coffee budget gets one, too." He laughed and walked out. Later that day, I held a floor-wide meeting. Everyone gathered around the main test rig, the same one that nearly exploded months earlier. The air smelled faintly of metal and coolant. I didn't bring slides or fancy charts, just a clipboard and my voice. "Here's what we're going to do," I said. "We start from the manual. We verify, we test, then we improve. That order never changes." No one interrupted me, not one. In the silence that followed, the only sound was the slow hum of the machinery. Steady, reliable, alive. For the first time in months, I felt the place breathe again. No drama, no grand speeches, just order, just purpose. I took a sip of coffee, set down the clipboard, and said quietly, "All right, let's get back to work." And we did. No applause, no victory music, just the rhythm of hands and machines in sync again. Somewhere deep inside the hum of the factory floor, a single thought echoed. Not loud, but certain. You don't have to shout when you wrote the manual.